Agitorium nostrum in nomine Domini. Okay, what is this document called? What is it?
On the origin of civil power by Pope Leo XIII, June 29th, 1881.
Okay, but what is the writing from the Pope called?
Encyclical.
Encyclical, yes. It's like a super letter to all the bishops of the world, usually. Sometimes an encyclical or bull or apostolic mandate might be aimed at a given bishops in a certain country, for example. But most often for the universal church. Okay, page 7, paragraph 15. Guadalupe, the one only reason.
The one only reason which men have for not obeying is when anything is demanded of them which is openly repugnant to the natural or the divine law. For it is equally unlawful to command to do anything in which the law of nature or the will of God is violated.
Such as, what would be an example?
For a doctor to do an abortion.
Yes.
Divorce, the divorce quote-unquote laws.
Right. Okay. Yes, or euthanasia, right? Or killing someone to get their organs. So if someone wants to give an extra kidney to their brother who needs one, can they do that?
Kidney? Yes.
The kidney?
Yes.
Yeah.
You can give a kidney. You can live off of one kidney. But if someone needs a heart,
Well,
can you give your heart to someone?
No.
So you don't want to sign those things for the driver's license, donation of organs. You don't sign that. Because what you're signing is, let's say you're 33 years old, you're driving your motorcycle, you hit a tree, and you're in a coma, but you're not dead, you're breathing, you're urinating, your blood is circulating, but you're not responding. So since 1974, according to Dr. Paul Byrne, they have a new definition of death called brain death, which is not real death. All it means is the outer layers of the brain are not responding. And many people have been murdered this way to get their heart or their lungs or their liver. You can't live without your liver. So those are violations against the natural law. Go on. If therefore
it should happen to anyone to be compelled to prefer one or the other, to disregard either the commandments of God or those of rulers, he must obey Jesus Christ, who commands us to give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. He must reply courageously after the example of the apostles. We ought to obey God rather than men. And yet there is no reason why those who so behave themselves should be accused of refusing obedience. For if the will of rulers is opposed to the will and the laws of God, they themselves exceed the bounds of their own power and pervert justice. Nor can their authority then be valid, which, when there is no justice, is null.
All right, so let's go to England at the time of Elizabeth I, and when you had to go at least once to the Anglican service. And many Catholics refused to go. Were they disobeying the lawful authority?
No.
Why? It was Queen Elizabeth. She was the queen. She was giving orders. Everybody must attend the Anglican service at least once.
It was an apparent
disobedience.
but it wasn't disobedience as such because the law that was given was against the divine law. And so the divine law supersedes any human law that could ever be passed from now till the end of time.
Yes. And in our situation, it's a perfect example. The Pope, these popes, these modernist bishops are imposing on us a new conciliar religion, new mass, new commandments, new theology, new philosophy, a whole new religion, basically, new priesthood, everything. And why don't we obey?
We don't obey because it's going against what God taught, against God's laws.
Yeah, exactly. And if you or I do in the name of obedience, we sin. And we're not going to be excused before God. Well, I was just trying to obey my superiors, Lord. Yeah, but I'm the Lord of the superiors, and you disobeyed me. So yes, 16. Read on, Perrin.
But in order that justice may be retained in government, it is of the highest importance that those who rule states should understand that political power was not created for the advantage of any private individual, and that the administration of the state must be carried on to the profit of those who have been committed to their care, not to profit of those to whom it has been committed. Let princes take example from the Most High God, the Most High God, by whom authority is given to them, and placing before themselves his model in governing the state. Let them rule over the people with equity and faithfulness, and let them add to their severity, which is necessary, a paternal charity. On this account, they are warned in the oracles of the sacred scriptures that they will have themselves some day to render an account to the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, if they shall fail in their duty, that it will not be possible for them in any way to escape the severity of God. The Most High will examine your work and search out your thoughts, because being ministers of his kingdom, you have not judged rightly. Horribly and speedily will appear to you, for a most severe judgment shall be for them that bear rule. For God will not accept any man's person, neither will he stand in awe of any man's greatness, for he made the little and the great, and he hath equally care of all, but a greater punishment is ready for the more mighty.
Yeah, so the higher you go in rank, the more severe the judgment. That is true. That's why many saints didn't want to be priests or bishops, because they felt so unworthy, and they knew it would be a greater judgment for them. So St. Francis of Assisi, was he a priest?
No.
No, he never became a priest, out of humility. 17.
And if these precepts protect the state, all cause or desire for sedition is removed, the honor and the security of rulers, the quiet and well-being of societies will be secure. The dignity also of the citizen is best provided for to them it has been permitted to retain, even in obedience, that greatness which conduces to the excellence of man. For they understand that in the judgment of God there is neither slave nor free man, that there is one Lord of all, rich to all that call upon him. But they that on this account submit to and obey their rulers, because these in a certain sort bring them before the image of God, whom to serve is to reign.
Mm-hmm. So the Pope here is emphasizing over and over again, all authority comes from
God.
and we render obedience to our lawful authority, except in cases that go against
The laws of God.
or,
Of nature.
yes, which is from God in the long run, yes. And that rulers themselves will also have to render.
And accounts to God.
Yes. So, that's the Catholic faith. So when men really believe all this, it holds society together. And like the Pope Leo XIII just said, it brings security to the rulers. It brings peace to the nation. Because everybody kind of knows their place, right? Because in God's way, there's an order. Is there an order among the angels? Are they all equal?
No.
No. So among men, there's inequality. And when men recognize that and do their duty in each rank, whatever they are, it brings a great peace. Peace is the tranquility of order. Peace is what?
The tranquility of order.
Pax est tranquillitas ordinis. Pax est tranquillitas ordinis. Peace is,
Tranquility and order.
no, not in order,
Of
order. Peace is the tranquility of order. Where there's order, there's peace. Where there's disorder, there's lack of peace. Chaos. And that's, yes. All right. Paragraph 18, right?
this one.
Yes.
Grady, you want to take it?
Sure.
Loud and clear.
But the Church has always so acted that the Christian form of civil government may not dwell in the minds of men, but that it may be exhibited also in the life and habits of nations. As long as there were at the helm of states pagan emperors who were prevented by superstition from rising to that form of imperial government which we have sketched, she studied how to instill in the minds of subjects immediately on their embracing the Christian institution the teaching that they must be desirous of bringing their lives into conformity with them. Therefore, the pastors of souls, after the example of Apostle Paul, were accustomed to teach the people with the utmost care and diligence, to be subject to prince and powers, to obey at a word, and to pray God for all men and particular, for kings and all that are in high station, for this is good and acceptable in the sight of God our Savior.
Yeah, so pray for our governors, pray for our leaders, and obey them in all things.
Except sin.
Yes.
And the Christians of old left the most striking proof of this. For when they were harassed in a very unjust and cruel way by pagan emperors, they nevertheless had no time omitted to conduct themselves obediently and submissively, so that in fact they seemed to vie with each other, those in cruelty and these in obedience.
19. You want to take it?
I'm not that good at reading, Father.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, all right. Anthony?
This great modesty, this fixed determination to obey, was so well known that it could not be obscured by the calumny and malice of enemies. On this account, those who were going to plead in public before the emperors for any persons bearing the Christian name proved by this argument especially that it was unjust to enact laws against the Christians, because they were in the sight of all men exemplary in their bearing according to the laws.
Athenagoras
Thus confidently addressed Marcus Aurelius Antonius and Lucius Aurelius Commodus, his son. You allow us, who commit no evil, to demean ourselves the most piously, to demean ourselves the most piously and justly of all toward God, and likewise toward your government, to be driven about, plundered, and exiled. In like manner, Tertullian openly praises the Christians, because they were the best and surest friends of all to the empire. The Christian is the enemy of no one, much less of the emperor, whom he knows to be appointed by God, and whom he must therefore, of necessity, love, reverence, and honor, and wish to be preserved together with the whole Roman Empire. Nor did
Yeah, so what's he saying, Tertullian and Athenagoras?
Christians are the best subjects.
Yeah, those who profess the Catholic faith, they obey, they're orderly, they respect the authority, and they're going to do their best for the love of their country in the right way, as long as there's no sin involved, especially the sins against the faith. Go on.
Nor did he hesitate to affirm that within the limits of the empire, the number of enemies was wont to diminish just in proportion as the number of Christians increased. There is also a remarkable testimony to the same point in the epistle to
Dionytus.
Dionysus, which confirms the statement that the Christians at that period were not only in the habit of obeying the laws, but in every office they of their own accord did more, and more perfectly, than they were required to do by the laws. Christians observe these things which have obtained the sanction of the law, and in the character of their lives, they even go beyond the law.
So that's footnote 27. So let's direct quotes from these sources. 20, Michael?
The case, indeed, was different when they were ordered by the edicts of emperors and the threats of praetors to abandon the Christian faith, or in any way fail in their duty. At these times, undoubtedly, they preferred to displease men rather than God. Yet, even under these circumstances, they were so far from doing anything seditious or despising the imperial majesty that they took on themselves only to profess themselves Christians and declare that they would not in any way alter their faith. But they had no thought of resistance. Calmly and joyfully they went to the torture of the rack, insomuch that the magnitude of the torments gave place to their magnitude of mind. During the same period, the force of Christian principles was observed in like manner in the army, for it was a mark of a Christian soldier to combine the greatest fortitude with the greatest attention to military discipline, and to add to nobility of mind immovable fidelity towards his prince. But if anything dishonorable was required of him, as, for instance, to break the laws of God, or to turn his sword against innocent disciples of Christ, then, indeed, he refused to execute the orders, yet in such wise that he would rather retire from the army and die for his religion than oppose the public authority by means of sedition or tumult.
Yes, thank you. So, name an example.
The 40 Martyrs of Sebaste.
What were they ordered to do?
To sacrifice to the gods.
And they obeyed, of course, right? It was a
Yeah.
lawful order.
No. They,
Did they raise a rebellion and try to kill the emperor?
No.
I believe they were the ones who were forced into an ice cold lake.
Yes, stripped and put on the lake to freeze to death. I think they lasted 3 days.
One of them defected, and then the one from the one that was observing, he jumped in and said, "I'm a Christian too."
Yeah, one of the Roman soldiers jumped in.
Didn't they have like a thing of warm water to tempt them to get into?
Yeah.
And one of them got in there and he died or something, and then a soldier converted and joined the other.
Yeah, he was offered the hot bath. And going from the extreme cold all of a sudden to the hot bath killed him. So he died in apostasy, which is pretty scary. Another soldier, for example.
Saint Sebastian.
So, yeah, outstanding Saint Sebastian. Yeah, outstanding. But many, many others. Many, many others. 21. Who's next? Guadalupe.
But afterward, when Christian rulers were at the head of states, the church insisted much more on testifying and preaching how much sanctity was inherent in the authority of rulers. Hence, when people thought of princedom, the image of a certain sacred majesty would present itself to their minds, by which they would be impelled to greater reverence and love of rulers. And on this account, she wisely provides that kings should commence their reign with the celebration of solemn rites, which, in the Old Testament, was appointed by divine authority.
Yeah, here in the U.S., they take an oath to obey the Constitution. What else? They go through these ceremonies. But in the Catholic age, there'd be a solemn high mass, and in that mass, after the sermon, the bishop would anoint the king, pouring over him the sacred chrism. So everybody saw the direct link to God, giving authority to this political ruler. And just that fact already brings great respect, great order, great peace, right? And that has to come back. That has to come back. The anointing of the political leaders. It has to come back. And in a Catholic society it would. Right? 22. Perrin.
But from the time when the civil society of man, raised from the ruins of the Roman Empire, gave hope of its future Christian greatness, the Roman pontiffs, by the institution of the Holy Empire, consecrated the political power in a wonderful manner. Greatly indeed was the authority of rulers, ennobled, and it is not to be doubted that what was then instituted would always have been very great gain, both to ecclesiastical and civil society, if princes and people had ever looked to the same object as the church, and indeed tranquility and a sufficient prosperity lasted so long as there was a friendly agreement between these two powers.
What two powers?
The powers of the church and the state.
Yes. The union of church and state is so beneficial, so harmonious, so fruitful, so peace-giving. No wonder the revolution wants to never see it again. By the sin and heresy and crime of
Separation of church and state.
Separation of church and state, which is a heresy and a crime. And it's against the order of nature to have a governing power without connection to God. It's an absurdity beyond belief. So yeah, when they work together, church and state, it brings an enormous peace. Enormous. And of course, that's presupposing that the clergy, the bishops, and the Pope are doing their duty. Right now, they're all upside down, like clowns, confused clowns that don't know where the truth is. So the whole world suffers. Read on.
If the people were turbulent, the church was at once the mediator for peace. Recalling all to their duties, she subdued the more lawless passions, partly by kindness and partly by authority. So if in rule and princes erred in their government, she went to them and put in before them the rights, needs, and lawful wants of their people, urged them to equity, mercy, and kindness, whence it was often brought about that the dangers of civil wars, popular tumults were stayed.
Yes, so if there was any tumults, it would be the church to step in and appeal to the ruler. Look, this is unjust to treat the people this way. You consider mercy, consider being more reasonable, right? And sometimes the church demanded public penance, or would not allow, in the case of one saint, he would not allow the emperor, Theodosius, to enter into the basilica until he had done public penance for murdering a bunch of people. Who was that? St. Ambrose. You don't enter this church. Imagine one of the Catholic bishops in Washington, D.C., for example, saying to Biden or Trump, well, Trump's not even Catholic, but Biden claimed to be, and standing at the entrance of the church saying, you're not entering this church till you do public penance for your supporting abortion. That's what should have been done, right? Imagine. In today's Novus Ordo system, that bishop would have been yanked out by the Pope because they're all liberal. But in a normal, good structure, with popes and bishops doing their duty, the bishop would be backed by the Pope, and the bishop would be backed by all the other bishops. So if he went to another diocese, a bishop would say, sorry, you don't enter here until you do public penance. Wouldn't that change the political scene? Just that little thing of that bishops doing their duty, what an impact that would have, right? Huge. And help save Biden's soul, because right now he hasn't changed and he'll probably go to hell supporting abortion. And part of the blame will go to the Pope and bishops. You see? So we need each other to get to heaven. It helps to have each other to get to heaven. Union of church and state, friends, family structure and all that. But to go to hell, it takes a lot of friends too to drag each other to hell. So when the Pope doesn't do his duty, bishops don't do their duty, they drag many to hell. Many. That's why popes and bishops have a frightful judgment. Frightful judgment. 23. Andres?
On the other hand, the doctrines on political power, invented by late writers, have already produced great ills amongst men, and it is to be feared that they will cause the very greatest disasters to posterity.
Okay, so here the Pope is saying, but the ideal is union of church and state, but now we have some crazy ideas coming up which are very harmful. And this is getting to the errors that he's condemning. Go on.
For an unwillingness to attribute the right of ruling to God as its author is not less than a willingness to blot out the greatest splendor of political power and to destroy its force. And they who say that this power depends on the will of the people err in opinion, first of all. Then they place authority on too weak and unstable a foundation. For the popular passions, incited and goaded on by these opinions, will break out more insolently, and with great harm to the commonwealth, to the common weal, descend headlong by an easy and smooth road to revolts and open sedition. In truth, sudden uprisings and the boldest rebellions immediately followed in Germany the so-called Reformation.
Footnote 29. Especially the peasant revolt and its repression by the German princes. Luther himself then had to stress the duty of the citizens to obey the civil power. So Luther incited actually a lot of the peasant revolts against their owners and masters. So that's what Protestantism does. So the Pope is saying here, if authority is seen come from the people, what? It's built on sand, it's weak, and people easily prone to follow their lower passions will easily give in to bitterness and revolt. Yes. And end up chopping the king's head off, which actually happened. Read on.
The authors and leaders of which, by their new doctrines, attacked the very foundations, religious and civil authority. And with this so fearful an outburst of civil war, and with such slaughter, that there was scarcely any place free from tumult and bloodshed. From this heresy there arose in the last century a false philosophy, a new right it is called, and a popular authority, together with an unbridled license which many regard as the only true liberty. Hence we have reached the limit of honors, to wit, communism, socialism, nihilism, hideous deformities of the civil society of men, and almost its ruin. And yet too many attempt to enlarge the scope of these evils, and under the pretext of helping the multitude, have already fanned no small flames of misery. These things, the things we thus mention, are neither unknown nor very remote from us.
Okay, so this is 1881, and he's already mentioning communism. Right? And Pius IX will also condemn communism. So these errors were already spreading from its fountainhead, which was Protestantism. And Protestantism sprung from nominalism, which was an error of William of Ockham in the 1300s, and also Marsilius of Padua, who promoted separation of church and state in the 1300s. And the Catholic Church condemned his document called Defensor Pacis, condemned it, and also condemned the philosophical errors of William of Ockham. Ockham is in England. And so you ideas have consequences. Ideas have consequences. A small error in the principles leads to big errors in the conclusions. Parvus error in principiis, manus error in conclusionibus. Small errors in the principles lead to huge errors in the consequences. A small turn of the plane, just 2 degrees, when a flight is going from New York City to LA, he turns to the right 2 degrees. Where is he going to end up?
He's not going to end up in where he was intending to.
In LA, he's going to end up most likely in either Seattle or Sacramento or Oregon, right? Mm-hmm. That's just 2 degrees, right? So small errors in the principles lead to huge errors in the conclusions, and often bloodshed, such as the error of my rights to do what I want with my body, including the baby in the mother's womb. That error leads to
Abortion.
Yeah, people think it's a small error, but what does it lead to? Millions of murders in cold blood. Cold blood. So this is very important what the Pope is saying here. So, 24, Grady.
This indeed is all the graver because rulers in the midst of such threatening dangers have no remedies sufficient to restore discipline and tranquility. They supply themselves with the power of laws and think to coerce,
which means to force,
by the severity of their punishment. Those who disturb their governments, they are right to a certain extent, but yet should seriously consider that no power of punishment can be so great that it alone can preserve the state for fear.
Okay, period. For preserve the state. So in other words, when the laws of God are spurned and not respected, and the church is not respected, the state has to use more what?
More force?
Police force. You need more police force. But the Pope is saying you can't run a peaceful government on just police force and threats and in prisons. You just can't. It'll collapse. And that's what he's saying. Go on.
For fear, as St. Thomas admirably teaches, is a weak foundation for those who are subdued by fear, would should on occasion arise in which they might hope for immunity, rise more eagerly against their rulers, in proportion to the previous extent of their restraining through fear, and besides, from too great fear many fall into despair, and despair drives men to attempt boldly to gain what they desire.
Okay, stop. That's a footnote quoting on the governance of rulers. That would be St. Thomas Aquinas. So those who try to govern only by fear, it's going to just backlash. It's going to lead to revolt, lead to dissension and bloodshed. So a police force run by fear, it doesn't work. But what does work with peace and harmony is the union of church and state, all of them respecting God's law. It all makes sense, right? It all makes perfect sense. Okay, we'll stop there and pick up next time. Agitorium nostrum in nomine Domini.